Good morning. A little unusual way to do this today. I've got a guest here, Anthony from Avoiding Babylon. Usually, guys, you and your co-host usually do the kind of the more late night YouTube shtick, and this is so late now for you that it's early, that it's actually wrap back around to the early morning.
I usually do the night shift with Rob, and then I'm in your chat every single morning, hanging out with your audience.
So there you go. It was inevitable that this would happen this way. Usually, I've been on your show a few times, but I go to bed so early that I'm usually dragging when I'm on with you.
Yeah, I don't know how you voluntarily do this. Like, I have no choice but to get up at this time for work, but your schedule is bizarre. Like, you voluntarily get up with, like, you're up at what, 3 a.m.?
Oh, way before that. I have noticed in my adult life that virtually for my entire life that I've always gotten up early, but I started noticing a few years ago that I was starting to wake up earlier and earlier, always coinciding with the government playing God with the clocks. And so after a while, it was getting up so early that I'd be going to the gym in the literal middle of the night and avoiding all the immodestly dressed people and getting a good workout in. The only other people there were people who were there to be seriously to work out. It was great. And then I started doing this and having small children and living near a city airport. It kind of works out. So,
Yeah, well,
no jet.
It's good for me. It's good for me because gives me a show to listen to on my way into work, a live show. I love it.
There's hardly anybody live streaming at this time, which actually works out really well. So today, I think we're going to talk about the address that his first public audience. You can watch the video of it on YouTube. It's like an hour and a half long. His address, though, will take maybe 5 minutes for me to read. But for those who disputed the idea that he ever said that Pope Francis is in fact in heaven, now he did not canonize him because that's an actual process, such as it is these days. I don't know how much scrutiny anybody goes into anymore. Here's what he actually said, posted to his official X account, posted yesterday. Today, in a special way, we remember our beloved Pope Francis with deep gratitude, who exactly 1 month ago returned to the Father's house. He accompanies us and prays for the church from heaven. Now, that's an interesting phrase, by the way, return to the Father's house. Father Dave Nix responded, to at great personal risk, I might add, says, besides canonizing an apostate, again, Father Dave Nix is not one known to mince words, the notion of a return to the house of the Father at death is a Gnostic encyclical idea that implies souls are pre-existent. Not even the soul of the Blessed Virgin Mary returned to heaven at the Assumption. So, for those who don't think that he said this stuff, he did. And I think a more mild response that we should possibly model ourselves after, with respect to Father Dave Nix, it comes from Matt Gaspers. He says, respectfully, I'll continue to pray for the repose of Francis's soul and not assume he's already in heaven. Only God knows for sure, but it seems rather presumptuous to claim he's already in heaven, given the amount of scandal and confusion he caused throughout his pontificate. And I think that is the correct answer. As Catholics, we are called to pray for the repose of the souls of people. Public figures, people we know in life. You could pray for the repose of the soul of George Washington if you so felt inclined, especially if you are one who believes that he, for some reason, was Catholic when he died. A theory I don't hold to, because if there's a hobby Catholics like to have, it's basically turning any cool public figure from history into a Catholic long after they've gone. Most prominent example I can come up with that is William Shakespeare. I've never seen any evidence that he was Catholic, but we do like to argue that he was.
We are strange.
We are a strange lot. It's a fun hobby, though, to argue that somebody is Catholic when they weren't. And after we go over his address at his public audience, I think we're going to talk a little bit about this sort of kind of weird response you're seeing to him from traditional Catholics and from conservative Catholics, which is all over the board. You and I spoke privately a little bit yesterday, and you described him as a cafeteria pope, where you just go into the cafeteria and take what we like and leave the rest. I tend to think he's a hybrid between John Paul II and Pope Francis, that he's meant to bridge the gap between the two.
That's a good way. That's a good way to synthesize it. Yeah.
And if you're dedicated to the truth, you can't ignore the evil, like bad, evil things he might do, but you can't also ignore the good things he does. So it means you have to take a different approach, because I would be shocked if he ever raised a Pachamama to the altars, or he ever put a little golden statue of that fat guy in the East that they worship on top of a tabernacle. which happened in Assisi in 1988. I was shocked if those things happened because that doesn't seem to be his style. So a going off the deep end response is, I don't think, going to be appropriate. That ignoring things isn't appropriate either. People need to take a realistic approach to things. The church has been in crisis for more than 60 years. It was really a bad idea to have an ecumenical council in the midst of a crisis in the church that was so bad that 50 years prior to that, the pontiff said, hey, maybe everyone should take an oath against modernism. That's just seems like a bad timing for such a thing. I remember saying repeatedly Francis was not the problem. He was just a manifestation of the problem. That's all he was. And there were shades of Francis and everybody who came before, going back to the last few years of Pope Pius XII. And you will see that now because it's going to become a lot harder to convince people there's a problem when you have a pope who speaks beautiful Latin, chants in beautiful Latin, says very Catholic things like what you're about to hear in his address, and takes very public stances on things in a very good way, while sometimes doing some not so great things like I covered yesterday. So we take the good with the bad, we be truthful, and we have to come up, tell the truth in a way that was categorically in a different way than Francis, because Francis made it easy. He really did. So here's the text of his address as published by Aletheia. It says, Dear brothers and sisters, I am pleased to welcome you in this, my first general audience. Today, I will resume the cycle of Jubilee catechesis on the theme Jesus Christ our Hope, initiated by Pope Francis. Let us continue today to meditate on the parables of Jesus, which help us to regain hope because they show us how God works in history. Today, I would like to dwell on a parable which is somewhat peculiar because it is a sort of introduction to all the parables. I refer to that of the sower. In a certain sense, in this account, we can recognize Jesus' way of communicating, which has a great deal to teach us for proclaiming the gospel today. Every parable tells a story that is taken from everyday life, yet wants to tell us something more, to refer us to a deeper meaning. The parable raises questions in us. It invites us to not stop at appearances. Before the story that is told or the image that is presented to me, I can ask myself, where am I in this story? What does this image say to my life? In fact, the term parable comes from the Greek verb parabelen, which means to throw in front of. The parable throws before me a word that provokes me and prompts me to question myself. The parable of the sower talks precisely about the dynamic of the word of God and the effects it produces. Indeed, every word of the gospel is like a seed that is thrown on the ground of our life. Jesus uses the image of the seed many times with different meanings. In chapter 13 of the Gospel of Matthew, the parable of the sower introduces a series of other short parables, some of which talk precisely about what is happening on the terrain, the wheat in the weeds, the mustard seed, the treasure hidden in the field. What then is this soil? It is our heart, but it is also the world, the community, the church. The word of God, in fact, makes fruitful and provokes every reality. At the beginning, we see Jesus who leaves the house and gathers a great crowd around him. His word fascinates and intrigues. Among the people, there are obviously many different situations. The word of Jesus is for everyone, but it works in each person in a different way. This context allows us to understand better the meaning of the parable. A rather unusual sower goes out to sow, but does not care where the seed falls. He throws the seeds even where it is unlikely they'll bear fruit, on the path, on the rocks, among the thorns. This attitude surprises the listener and induces him to ask, how come? We're used to calculating things, and at times it is necessary, but this does not apply in love. The way in which this wasteful sower throws the seed is an image of the way God loves us. Indeed, it is true that the destiny of the seed depends also on the way in which the earth welcomes it, and the situation in which it finds itself. But first and foremost, in this parable, Jesus tells us that God throws the seed of his word on all kinds of soil. That is, in any situation of ours. At times, we are more superficial and distracted. At times, we let ourselves get carried away by enthusiasm. Sometimes we are burdened by life's worries. But there are also times when we are willing and welcoming. God is confident and hopes that sooner or later the seed will blossom. This is how he loves us. He does not wait for us to become the best soil, but he always generously gives us his word. Perhaps by seeing that he trusts us, the desire to be better soil will be kindled in us. This is hope, founded on the rock of God's generosity and mercy. In telling the way in which the seed bears fruit, Jesus is also talking about his life. Jesus is the word, he is the seed, and the seed to bear fruit must die. Thus, this parable tells us that God is ready to waste away for us and that Jesus is willing to die in order to transform our life. I have in mind that beautiful painting by Van Gogh, The Sower at Sunset. That image of the sower and the blazing sun also speaks to me of the farmer's toil. And it strikes me that behind the sower, Van Gogh depicted the grain already ripe. It seems to me an image of hope. One way or another, the seed has borne fruit. We are not sure how, but it has. At the center of the scene, however, is not the sower, who stands to the side. Instead, the whole painting is dominated by the image of the sun, perhaps to remind us that it is God who moves history, even if he sometimes seems absent or distant. It is the sun that warms the clods of earth and makes the seed ripen. Dear brothers and sisters, in what situation of life today is the word of God reaching us? Let us ask the Lord for the grace always to welcome the seed that is his word. And if we realize we are not a fruitful soil, let us not be discouraged, but let us ask him to work on us more to make us become a better terrain. And then he makes a prayer appeal, saying the situation in the Holy Land is increasingly worrying and painful. I renew my heartfelt appeal to allow the entry of dignified humanitarian aid and put an end to the hostilities, the heart-rending price of which is being paid by children, the elderly, and the sick. Then he says some nice things about people from the English-speaking world coming to visit him that day, which they did. And I saw some people online, I think, nitpicking a little bit. I'm fine with people saying, hey, here's some honest criticism of things that are things we should be watchful about. But some people got kind of upset that Van Gogh was used as an example. I think Van Gogh is an artist that people might recognize the work of because it's so distinctive, assuming he's speaking to a generally literate audience, which in the 21st century, at least in America, is a heck of a gamble to be making. But Van Gogh was not a Christian, as far as I know. He was.
I actually think he converted and became Catholic towards the end of his life, because I was at the Met.
Now, this is actually good reason to believe this, or are we going back with George Washington was secretly Catholic because a guy on the internet told me so.
No, yeah, it could be one of those. It could definitely be one of those.
With full stonecutter funeral with full honors after he was gone.
There's a at the Metropolitan Museum in Manhattan, there's he has a few very Catholic paintings there. Now, I don't know if those are just artist renditions, and they could have nothing to do with his faith, but he did have some really interesting Catholic paintings where it's like you look at it one way and it looks like one thing, but then when you like move a little bit, you see it's like Our Lady standing there or something. So I really don't know, but this oh man, before this conclave, we kind of talked about this, and you and I both wanted an acceleration. Like, we were accelerationists. We were like,
we wanted the whole thing to be resolved with the Pope that I think I said this yesterday here. You're not going to get Pius XIII wielding a flaming sword, cleaning out the James Martin types from the church and reestablishing the church to whatever would be possible, that would be in keeping with the pre-conciliar church, this side of many mushroom clouds anyway. It's not possible.
Yeah.
Without going through a global cataclysm. It's not going to happen.
But the other end of that is just give us Francis II, because what's happening now, it's tricky because he hasn't said anything of substance yet, and there's no way. You're right. We're not going to get a second Pachamama incident. We're not going to get another crazy Assisi meeting. But the problem is that this guy is very eloquent, and he knows he has a way better temperament than Francis. And what he's doing is trying to synthesize the Francis papacy so it's more digestible to people, because I think the majority of people are totally fine with their Vatican II Catholicism with smells and bells.
I will, to put it another way, he has said repeatedly that he is continuing Pope Francis's, quote, reforms. And if those were, as I said, I think it was Saturday or Sunday after he was elected, if that merely means the rooting out of corruption in the Roman Curia and the Vatican Bank, okay, whatever, because that was going on a lot behind the scenes. But the problem was a lot of people put in charge these reforms were not exactly reform minded. They were just put a new face to the same problem kinds of people. But if that's what he's doing, just trying to clean house, that might be one thing. But he has said he is dedicated to continuing Pope Francis's view of synodality. Now, I don't actually know what Pope Francis's view of synodality was, because he remarkably never told us.
We have no idea. Nobody knows what synodality is. So look,
right. I mean, Rotticelli described it once as a meeting on meetingality. That's what the synod on synodality was.
But he could look. There's nothing inherently bad about synodality. So there's
Well, it
two
depends.
things that could
Is
be.
synodality about listening to people who don't get their voices listened to, or is it about decentralizing authority in the church and putting the laity in charge of things that the laity have never been in charge of? If it's the latter, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because
Well, there's two different things that could be happening here. What we all wanted, like from our side of the spectrum, we all wanted a pope to come in and demolish the Francis papacy and correct all the errors. Now he could be coming in and saying, absolutely not, we are not doing that. As a matter of fact, we're going to continue it. Or he could be trying to just say, look, we're not going to demolish the Francis papacy. We'll try to figure out a way to incorporate him in, but we are still like, he's still, the possibility of correcting those errors is there because he's only paid like slight lip service to Francis. So if he's doing that, it could be like a signal to the people who loved Francis that when he makes those changes, it's not out of animosity or hatred towards Francis. But it doesn't look that way. I mean, that's a very hopeful outlook.
I still take the wait and see what he does, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say, oh, his meeting with her message to non-Christian groups about, how everybody should get along and it's all valid. That's not good. Ecumenical dialogue. I called it ecumenical dialogue under Francis for a reason, because it's either Jesus wasn't lying when he said he is the only way to the Father, or there's no point to what we're doing. There's none. Yeah. Just go live your life. Because universalism doesn't make sense.
Under Francis, you had a camaraderie amongst all conservative and traditional Catholics. Like that, there was like they were feeling like they were on the same side of the fight. But under Leo, what you're getting is he'll give an address, and in one part of the address, he'll praise Francis and synodality, and then later on in that same address, he'll speak out against ruling like an authoritarian. And you'll get Austin Ivory highlighting the first part, saying, look, he's a continuation of Francis. And then you'll get conservative Catholics going, look, he's rebuking Francis, speaking out against ruling like an authoritarian.
This is why I'm reading so many of his statements in full, because the context is important with what he's doing. This is why I think he's a hybrid.
Yeah. And
he can't go out there and kick James Martin out of the church without causing a firestorm. That doesn't work with I'm the unity pope.
So this is why I call it the cafeteria papacy, because it's like cafeteria Catholicism. It's like, oh, let me cherry pick what I like that he said. And it's going to be difficult for those of us who are a little more weary of this guy, because the people who look, our instinct as Catholics is to love the Pope, right? Our instinct is to defend our father. And if he's not malicious like Francis was, it's not right to go and like nitpick every little thing he says.
That's absolutely true. And this is also, and I'll even go further. Under Francis, I got really angry whenever I would see a Protestant say, hey, Catholics, you need to take care of this Pope of yours. He's evil. I'm like, hey, why don't you go? And then I immediately stop myself from saying things that would be scandalous and kind of language that we'll say that sometimes Tim Gordon uses. Remember, I loved watching that live stream of yours when he came on and was saying Tim Gordon things in a Tim Gordon kind of way. And your audience were like, oh.
If my audience freaked out. But look, I'm not going to tell Tim how to talk, right? I don't ever use that language on my stream, but I'm not going to tell Tim you can't speak a certain way. But yeah, I was always fine with like in-house Catholics having a conversation, discussing the family. But anytime a Protestant made a comment, I want to go fight them. It's like, you don't get to talk about my father. I can talk about him, but you don't get to.
Right. Like my stepfather was not a nice man, and he and I don't get along. I haven't spoken to him in years, but if somebody were to go after him, I'd be very angry, even though he's not even biologically my father, but he raised me. And it's the same kind of thing with Francis. It really is. That's why I don't know, maybe it was Rorate Chele who said on X that it was a little like his funeral was a little like watching the funeral for a bad stepfather.
Yeah.
Which is a really loaded thing to say, by the way, because the word stepfather implies a lot. Now, I don't know where this was in the comments here. Let me see. Somebody said, oh, yeah, here it is. Harmony says, I will continue to be grateful for who wasn't made Pope. There are a few that have been mind-blowing. I'll be thankful for what God has permitted. I don't have unrealistic expectations. And that is a very rational response. Yeah. I refuse to just pull my hair out and screech. I think that's a very effeminate response. And I even said as much on X to the point where it made the front page of Canon 212, and Frank Walker didn't like it, which is fine. I like Frank Walker, but when I say things he doesn't like, he'll put me on blast just like anybody else, and that's fine. It's actually kind of a badge of honor in a way. Go read Canon 212. It's fantastic, and that man is a poet when it comes to the headlines he makes. But your Catholic heroes, well, it's kind of a little off topic, but not exactly. He says, was the Novus Ordo Mass brought to us by revolutionary men, specifically a stone-cutting cardinal named Bugnini? Yes, it was.
Yeah.
He was the final person involved in the process other than Pope Paul VI, but the Novus Ordo Mass was designed and argued for decades before it was foisted on the church. I mean, that's just an objective truth of history. And you can find, it's weird. I'm not a big fan of sedevacantism, but the best examination of where the new Mass came from Father Cicada.
Yeah. Yeah. Not
like
the work of human hands, right?
Yeah, that's the work of human hands.
Oh, the work of human hands.
And by the way, do you know in the Bible what that he took that from one of the consecration prayers? I think which one is it? Is it the prayer 2 or whatever it is? Whatever is the one that's the one that you see the most in like the wishy-washy new masses.
Yeah, it's the shortened version.
A very short prayer, right?
Eucharistic prayer 2.
Yeah. And the phrase "work of human hands" in the Bible, you know what's usually referred to, what that refers to?
Probably idol worship, right?
Idolatry.
Yeah.
You would think that they would change that in the consecration prayer, because it's a little short-sighted. It's a little short. No, I maintained that the new Mass is valid.
Mm-hmm.
You get the Eucharist is confected. I know some of the best Catholics I know in life are dedicated to the new Mass. They go to the new Mass and don't have a lot of interest in driving 90 miles like I do to go to the traditional Mass.
But what you're getting at is important, right? So what happened under Francis is a lot of people woke up to that it wasn't really Francis that was the problem in the end, that this problem was much larger, and it goes back to the council, and it goes back to this revolutionary mindset and conceding things to the world and opening up the church to the world. So under Francis, we were able to talk about those things, but now under Leo, I'm watching guys that were all talking about all these issues before, now just raving about every little good thing Leo does. And he is doing a few good things. He is saying some good things. The stuff he said to the Eastern churches was beautiful.
And in charity and spirit of truth, they have to be talked about, but that doesn't mean turning a blind eye to his address at the UN or Cardinal Parolин's letter from him to the UN. If you haven't seen that, I was going to do it on a live stream, but I've got it just as a pre-recorded thing for this coming Saturday.
Yeah. It's just like the real issue was never really Francis. So maybe this will be good in some ways, where we're not going to have this hostility coming from the Pope on us. And then maybe we can start focusing on like the actual, like our Catholic identity has been ripped away from us over the past 60, 70 years. Mm-hmm. You really saw that come to fruition under Francis. Well, Michael Matt's conference, the Catholic Identity Conference, is a brilliant name for a conference, because we really did feel like anything that made us unique as Catholics had been stripped away under Francis. And we need to start reclaiming that. We want to be weird. We don't want our service to look anything like a Protestant service, because we are Catholic and our services should be uniquely weird in the world. We incorporate pagan ritual. We do not incorporate Protestant evangelical stuff. Like we're weird like that, and we like our weirdness, and we don't want to conform to the world. That is my biggest hope, honestly. It's not that he will give us the Latin Mass back without restraint. It's that the abuses of the general instruction for the Roman Missal, for the typical Mass, will come to an end. Mm-hmm. That we will tell people the Catholic Mass should look Catholic. Maybe I'd love to see the Oregon Catholic Press put on blast. I don't know why. They're based out of Portland, so I don't know why Archbishop Sample tolerates them the way he does, but they are the biggest Catholic publisher for your typical ordinary form parish and their hymnals. And there's some really horrible inclusions in there. Yeah. But we'll see. Now, this Michael Haynes gave us this yesterday on X. I think it was this one. Hold on. My tabs are all screwed up this morning. Michael Haynes, LifeSite news reporter.
Vatican releases busy liturgical schedule for Pope Leo XIV next month. It includes a consistory on June 13th for cardinals to vote on various causes for canonization. Now, consistory is also where new cardinals are made. Now, I don't think he's making new cardinals because he hasn't exactly had time to vet people. So that, but a consistory that can happen. But if that was going to happen, we probably would know by now. He says there will also be a Corpus Christi procession for St. John from St. John Lateran to St. Mary Major on June 22nd. All of those are generally good things. Now, here's the schedule in Italian. My Italian is non-existent. Now, the question I have is a lot of the canonizations that were started under Pope Francis went on hold. I think you'll see Carlo Acutis finished there. He'll be raised to the altars there. I don't know who else is on that list. Do you have any idea who else is on the list of getting canonized soon?
No, but I'm pretty sure you're right about Carlo Acutis. What's sad about Carlo Acutis is he probably was a lovely young man, and he probably did have a beautiful little faith life. But what we're talking about with canonizations are someone who lived a life of extraordinary virtue that we are to emulate. And I've looked into Carlo, and it's just he just seems like a really like a normal kid who like a typical kid that you might know that loved the faith, like he just seems like a normal.
Yeah, no doubt that kid was going to stick around after, he was no longer living with his parents. He'd still be Catholic and going to mass.
Yeah, like he just.
I don't have anything against Carlo Acutis. I don't.
Neither do I.
What little I've seen is he seems like he was probably holier than I am.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I don't trust modern canonizations in general, and it's simply because they got rid of the devil's advocate. Francis came up with like a third category for becoming a saint, all sorts of weird things. I just love to see that tightened up because there are legitimate questions about the process for him in particular. And it's a process, not him.
You want to see people who live lives of extraordinary virtue that you can emulate their life, because what you're emulating in their life is a reflection of Jesus Christ. Like they lived so much like Jesus that you see an aspect of Christ in that person. And I'm not saying that Carlo wasn't that. It's just I would like to see some of the figures who really did show that character. Those should be the figures raised to the altar. So I don't know what his plans are. But here's the other thing. We've seen a lot of olive branches to Francis and synodality over the past 2 weeks, and we're all assuming we're going to get those towards the traditionalists, and that maybe he'll abrogate a little bit of traditionis, but he hasn't done anything like that yet. And
Virgin most powerful says, why are you criticizing the canonization, Carlo Acutis? This is why trads are being ostracized. Watch what you say. Well, I'm not criticizing him. I'm saying the process is suspect, and if you look at the process, it is suspect. I'm sure the kid is holier than I am, but it used to be. It actually is a great cause of great scandal when we don't take canonizations seriously.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example of this. This one will ruffle some feathers. After the what they called the McCarrick report was released back in 2020, they threw John Paul II, Benedict XVI, while he was still alive, and Archbishop Vigano under the bus, blaming them for McCarrick. And then the hierarchy, I think it may have been Cardinal Wuerl at the time, all said, this is why we need to be more careful with canonizations in the future. What do you think they were implying there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there should be an automatic 50-year to 100-year hold on it, but just besides them taking the devil's advocate out, like things do come out later that you might have overlooked, and there's a lot of money involved in these canonization processes, and it's just you want to avoid scandal at all costs. I'm not saying anything about Carlo himself. I'm saying I have yet to find something about his life that would cause me to tell my children, I want you to emulate this young man. He's created a website is the greatest thing I can find about him. He created a website about the Eucharist. So, I mean, that's beautiful. That's lovely. And maybe he suffered well under his diagnosis when he got sick. But when you give a child a saint to read about, you want them to read about that saint and go, I want to be like him so that I could be more like Christ. And I just don't, that's all.
Bobby W wants to throw a little fuel onto the fire here, saying Carlos' friends said they didn't even know he was a practicing Catholic. Again, I will file that as hearsay, though. So that's why I
don't trust Bob. Don't trust Bobby. I hear he goes to an Eastern liturgy, and I don't trust any of those guys that go to those Eastern liturgies, man. You can't trust those No, I'm just kidding. Bobby's a friend of mine.
They have to be. They've never been formally defined as such, but logically they'd have to be. After all, you're having the Pope and the magisterium of the church saying you can pray for this person and they're in heaven, bringing your prayers to the altar of God, as we see described in the book, the letter to the Hebrews. Never defined as such, but logically it is. And then you start getting into whole other areas there. This is one of the reasons why I don't really generally criticize the contemporary saints or anything, other than I will say I share in Michael Matt's mirth. Like, I will never forget the video that he made after Paul VI and John the 23rd were raised to the altars, because he was just totally flabbergasted, especially about Paul VI.
Yeah, you think about it, he's the guy who transformed the praxis of Catholicism. So you think about the destruction that happened under his watch. So to raise him to the altars really is a bizarre thing. Like Paul VI, Paul VI canonization, I know, broke a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that did. Catholic Arrows with the super chat. Rejoice, my daughter, because the hour approaches when the most beautiful work under the sun will be born. Jesus' Sister Marie of St. Peter, 1843. To join the Arch Confraternity of the Holy Face. Yeah, the Holy Face devotion is one of those things that doesn't get enough promotion, largely because a lot of older devotions just kind of went by the wayside in the last few decades. This is why I'm fond of telling people Francis wasn't the problem. He was just a logical extension of it. We've lost a lot. And this is why I generally, though, take a more modern or moderate approach. And here, I'm going to show you something that hit the news yesterday. This is from a letter from the District Superior of the Society of St. Pius X on the new Holy Father. Now, many of you will say, oh, the SSPX, they're in schism. They are not in schism. They have never been declared to be in schism. You may have a bishop who tells you they're in schism. Well, he's wrong. Pope Francis gave our Bishop Athanasius Schneider the authority to visit and observe the SSPX for 2 years on behalf of the Vatican in an official capacity. And he wrote a letter afterwards saying that they're not in schism. Everything they do is Catholic. That they're basically repeating what Benedict had said about the SSPX, which is that their issues with the SSPX and back and forth is an internal family squabble. That's what it is. And it should be best left to the bishops to deal with. And here's the Society of St. Pius X actually telling people, when it comes to the criticisms of Leo XIV, to chill out a little bit. Now, you'd think that they would be on team, let's just light everything on fire and pull our hair out, but they're not. They're very measured in things. They tell you to, this is why I don't go off on the latest negative thing he did. I'll tell you the truth, but I'm not going to pull my hair out. And they tell you the same thing. And in fact, they actually tell you to ignore people who do that. Food for thought. This is from the Society of St. Pius X. Dear faithful, the election of Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost as the 267th Pope of the Catholic Church has been a momentous occasion. Taking the name Leo XIV, it seems that everyone, from professional Vaticanists to every man in the pew, is scrutinizing every word uttered from the sovereign pontiff's lips and every gesture he makes in public. Moreover, the entire pontificate of his predecessor, Leo XIII, is being examined to see if it may provide some insight into what the future holds for Leo XIV's reign and, indeed, the Catholic Church. As an apostolate of the Catholic Church, the Society of St. Pius X prays for Pope Leo XIV at every Mass and offers prayers daily for the success of his reign. The task he has been called to is formidable. The state of the world appears dire, and the Church remains beset by a crisis that has lasted for nearly 6 decades. Now, this man, born and raised in our own country, is charged with the care of 1.4 billion souls across the globe. As such, it is imperative that all of us, the priests, religious, and lay faithful who attend the Society's chapels, pour out our prayers for the Pope with all the fervor we can muster. I know it's tempting to go on social media to see what the experts are saying about this pontiff. Certainly his past statements on some of the most polarizing issues in the Church are a matter of public record. However, I would encourage you not to be overly influenced by the online world, and especially in these early days of his pontificate. In the spirit of charity, I would urge all of us to keep the Holy Father in your prayers and to hold him in your hearts. For our part, we pray that with the help of God's grace, we will continue the mission of our heavenly patron, St. Pius X, to restore all things in Christ. especially the sacred traditions of the Holy Mother Church, while continuing to form holy priests who will travel this great land of ours, the land of Pope Leo XIV, to provide the holy sacrifice of the Mass and all sacraments to the faithful in accordance with the traditional Roman rite. May Pope Leo XIV faithfully fill the shoes of St. Peter and strengthen the faithful. Spread the gospel and never waver in telling the world that what it needs above all else is our Lord Jesus Christ, whose death and resurrection gives all men and women hope of eternal life. Sounds like to me the district superior of the SSPX is telling people to chill out just a little bit.
You want to know what's crazy? Everybody will say like the SSPX, they are always so measured and like calm about everything. They did the same thing under Francis. They said his name in the mass at every mass. They didn't freak out over every little thing Francis did. They always seem to come out with just this measured approach. And I think it's good advice,
they did
right?
correct something he did say though a few times and did. They did, but it was necessary. It was brutal when they did it, but it was also done in like the most calm way possible.
Look, the thing is, we have to also remember that we didn't always freak out about everything Francis did. We kind of freaked out about the big things Francis did, right? So when Amoris Laetitia came out, that was a big deal. When Fiducia Supplicans came out, that was a big deal. When Traditionis Custodes came out, that was a big deal. But I didn't ever like harp every single episode on, can you believe what Francis said? Like especially towards the end of his papacy, I was just so done. Like I had such Francis fatigue. I was like, I don't really care what Francis is doing anymore. Let's just talk about other stuff. I
kind of got to that point a little bit. Like, after Joe McLean and I were live streaming and when he was named Pope, and he and I both reacted very negatively. And the next day I did my report. I was visibly tired. And then I just went out with family and just drove around all day and talked on the phone with a friend and calmed down a little bit. But there is no energy to treat him the same way, and it's not warranted. That doesn't mean just, ooh, look at all the wonderful things. There's the realistic question I have seen from people is a hard one, which is, will you accept the return of your traditional Mass in exchange for continuing what Francis did at a slower speed?
I think everybody will. I mean, what other choice do we have, though? Honestly, honestly, so even because I do see some of the trads there is like an internal war within traditional outlets now, because some trads are like, how can you guys be falling for this? And others are like, look, we're not falling for anything. We're kind of just figuring out how we operate under the new paradigm. We have a new paradigm, and we have to figure out how we are going to continue to be Catholic. So there's a few things happening. Some people were saying, oh, who gave the call to all the semi-trads and told them like that? It's like, that's not what's happening here. And I actually do kind of,
I can tell you for a fact, whenever someone calls people a semi-trad, you know that they're not someone to be taken all that seriously, for one. Yeah. Two, no call went out.
No, that's the point.
If there was bribes given, my check never arrived. So,
but what other pastors
cases, by the way, because every other week it seems like there's an accusation that Taylor Marshall or somebody got paid off to be nice to whoever, and that they always lump everybody in. And I'm like, well, my check never arrived. What's up with that? Now my price is pretty high. If you want to buy my loyalty, it's going to cost you a very pretty penny. But
what else should we do? And I do think it's actually a good thing that we're not letting this Pope come into a hostile environment. Like we never enjoyed being angry at Francis. Like I never liked it. It was always, it felt awful to be angry at my father. So if the new Pope comes in and he's not doing those violent acts towards us and calling us names and all this stuff, I'm not going to obsess on every little word he says. 90% of the time, us obsessing on it is what brings it to light, because who's really reading every single homily the Pope puts out besides people like us? Like let's just get back to actually talking about the problems that exist within like your Catholic life in the modern world, if we can. Like I don't need to harangue the Pope over every little thing he says.
Right. So that's why I say we take the good with the bad, you tell the truth, and go from there, because Francis made it easy. Now, somebody asked, and I couldn't find it again, but there was, oh, now it's even, my brain is blanking on it, but because the chat is very active here responding to that SSPX thing, suggesting that he was going to bend, that they're just bending the knee to get bishops. Well, that might be it, but if Leo comes out tomorrow and says, no, I'm not giving you bishops, then they'll just do what they were going to do anyway. Everybody who observes the SSPX knows that their time is running short, and that either the SSPX are going to continue doing what they do, or they're going to make a deal with Rome of some kind to continue doing what they do. We'll see. Now, I found the comment here. He says, Catholic Crusader says, haven't heard from Vigano. I wonder if he's being censored. It's unlikely that he's being censored. What's more likely happening with Archbishop Vigano is he filed a lawsuit against Pietro Parolin and the Vatican Bank, and he probably has been advised by counsel to not say anything publicly until this process is done. If you see anything from him, it'll be it's a feast day. Here's a letter teaching about the feast day and generic stuff about, evil actors in the world, but nothing that will get him in trouble in the court system, because he's in a very serious lawsuit now with the Vatican Bank. Now, Joseph for the super chat. Hi, Anthony. For fun, I just emailed you the airtight argument for why Shakespeare was a secret Catholic, according to Anthony Stine, AI bot via Gab AI. Wonderful. I always find it again. I just am amused when people say, "Well, this public figure was Catholic." Maybe instead of worrying too much about that, we should worry about the public figures who are Catholic. So this is making the rounds right now. You probably heard that J.D. Vance met with the Pope, didn't kiss the ring or bend the knee. I don't know why people are surprised by this, and I'm not saying that to defend him. He's the vice president of the United States and the U.S. president. The rules say you can't do that, which means just by running for office, you make the decision that you are going to follow that stupid rule at whatever the cost is to you when you do that. This goes back to, as far as I know, the earliest example of this I can give you goes back like 100 years or something to a famous Olympics event where they were, I think it was in England or someplace, there was a monarch present, and all the flags of the world were being brought out at the opening ceremonies, and everybody by runners, and they were running with their flags, and everybody dipped the thing as it approached the monarch. And famously, the United States said no. It kept the flag raised as high as possible. When J.D. Vance says that he is vice president is not permitted by the rules governing approaching foreign dignitaries to kiss the ring or anything like that, it's true. He's not. He also knew that when he became vice president. I'm not trying to excuse him. I'm just surprised people are surprised by this. You have to go back to the anti-Catholic nature of this country and how profoundly anti-Catholic this place was when it was founded. And it does beg the question, can a Catholic in good faith become vice president?
I don't know. I'm the one who posted that video. It was from a Ross Douthat conversation, and he got into the specifics about why he didn't. He got into saying, as a Catholic, like the protocol would be to go kiss the ring of your spiritual father, but I'm here representing the United States of America as the vice president, and we have this protocol that we're supposed to follow. So, I posted it knowing, it's not shocking that he didn't kiss the ring of the Pope, but it's still, we do see every single president go to the Wailing Wall and dip their head and put their hand up on the Wailing Wall. That's not the same as bowing to a person, I understand, but Obama bowed to some king at some point, and it's like, I don't think there would have been an issue if he went in and he kissed the ring of the Pope, except it would have caused Protestant mayhem in the States. I don't think he would have gotten in trouble with Trump. I don't think it was anything. I think it would have, the Bible Belt would have lost their freaking mind if the vice president went in and kissed the ring of the Pope. That's really what it comes down to. And I said, even if he didn't do that, what would have been really cool is if he pulled the Holy Father aside and said, "Hey, Holy Father, will you hear my confession?" And then that would have been like, could you imagine at the ear of the Pope and like, "Hey, Holy Father, will you hear my confession?" But yeah, it's not something we should be making a huge deal over, but it does, like you said, bring into like the question, can you in good conscience be a president of the United States? Because every single king in the Middle Ages would go and kiss the papal slippers, because it was not obedience to the Pope, it was subjection to Christ the King. So you are subjecting yourself to Christ the King through his vicar, and just acknowledging that you have a power higher than yourself, even if you are a king.
And I guarantee you that Joe Biden didn't kiss the ring or kiss the papal shoes, nor did JFK. And I'm going to be that guy. Ron DeSantis wouldn't have done it either.
Yeah, no way.
So I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying it's not going to happen. And so the question is, should we expect a Catholic to occupy those offices? It would be great if he would do it. Here's a good response from Murray Rundus from he's kind of the new editor and production manager for Catholic Family News. He posted this on X. He said, a surprising amount of people are showing that they have not comprehended this. J.D. Vance did not just refuse to kiss the ring because of some convert awkwardness. Confession, I too in my first years as a convert had no idea how to act when greeting a bishop. Rather, he went out of his way to say that the reason he did not kiss the ring when he would have otherwise was because he cannot do so in his public role as vice president. Therefore, Immortale Dei of Leo XIII applies, because this split-brain disorder would put man in conflict with himself, whereas he had always to be consistent and never in the least point, nor in any condition of life, to swerve from Christian virtue. The fact is that this was an action that he, as a public representative of both his country and of his faith, planned and deliberated to show a division between his public and private life. One is an American, the other is a Catholic. In reality, J.D. Vance is one person, not two. He deserves to be criticized and corrected for his reasoning. We all have to work on bringing ourselves to greater unity with Christ. Most of us talk a big game here on Twitter, or YouTube, I suppose. Are we actually so virtuous in our everyday life? Well, let us use this as an opportunity to repent of our own double lives that we create every time we sin. And to back up what he says there, I stopped paying any attention whatsoever to what Ann Coulter said several years ago, when she very publicly said Catholics only became acceptable in the United States when we became Americans first.
Yeah.
And she said that happened at Vatican II. She said that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wonderful. So
wait, can you go back to Bobby's comment? Because what an interesting point he made. It was the super chat, the last super chat he did.
Let me take a look here.
About dual loyalties.
I would have loved a public discussion on dual loyalties.
Like, I mean,
that's such a minefield to enter into too. Because certain public figures.
I'm
Ben
just
Shapiro
saying, most politicians will go and kiss Netanyahu's ring. So if JD Vance
they'll kiss that wall of that Roman fort that they keep telling you is the temple when it's a piece of a Roman fort.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. But it is an interesting discussion, because JD Vance had an opportunity there for people. If he'd have kissed the ring and people went, he has dual loyalties to Rome. It's like, oh, really? Is Rome lobbying the American politicians right now? So
sort of. They are sort of. I mean, not openly right now, but there are people who think that Prevost was made Pope to get the U.S. funding back, and that would be weird. But I can see why people think that, and it's not entirely outside the realm of possibility.
Being that Pope Leo is an American citizen, does he have to register as a foreign lobbyist if he does petition the whole?
There is an article out there now that I should go find that is raising legitimate questions about this. I went over does he keep a citizenship one? That's the tip of the iceberg. There are a whole lot of other questions there. And it becomes a more important question because Trump said they're already talking about a visit to the U.S. And that would make sense. Popes in the post-conciliar era, when suddenly most of the popes weren't Italian, they typically go to their home country.
Yeah.
Except for Francis, pretty shortly after becoming Pope.
Yeah, for those of us who were Catholic before France, especially under John Paul II, when John Paul visited Poland, it was like this beautiful moment because they had finally defeated communism, but Pope John Paul yelled at the people of Poland because they had become materialists. Then famously, Benedict, when he visited Germany, the German
Regensburg address.
The German bishops wouldn't even acknowledge it. He was walking by, he was putting his hand out, thinking they would even shake his hand, and they just ignored him. Like, they were so rude to Benedict.
The German bishops hated him.
Mm-hmm.
This goes back to something I I think I'm one of the more moderate voices in the traditional world, simply because I don't think the Novus Ordo Mass is invalid. And I acknowledge there were debates about this among mainstream theologians for like decades. And then Benedict XVI published a revision to the Novus Ordo, fixing the issue. And the German bishops ignored it. His own countrymen ignored it. You can go, if you go into Germany, they're still apparently using the older translations of the Novus Ordo, which has theological questions about the validity.
Yeah.
I know that's a hardcore thing to be for people. Like when they hear that, they go, wait, does that mean it was not valid for 30 years? That depends on the theologian you ask. It was an open debate.
There was a reason Benedict changed the responses and things like that. Like when if you guys remember, there was a time where we used to say, and also with you instead of and with your spirit. There was a time that during the consecration, the priest after the council would say for all men. Like, right. And it's for the many. Like there were things that needed to be changed because of these theological debates. Now, if we're not allowed to have these debates at all, Benedict may not have made those corrections. But the fact that we are having these discussions, they do leak their way up the hierarchy. So I don't think like some of these theological conversations that even the laity are having are bad. I think sometimes these things do make their way up, and Rome will make some corrections when they're needed.
And this is kind of my attitude about talking about the things the Holy Father does.
Yeah.
You have to have the discussion. You can't ignore the questionable things, because I cannot defend the relationship with the UN that the Vatican has had since Paul VI laid down the papal tiara. Okay, I can't defend that. And it continues under him. But I'm not going to ignore the good either to try to paint him to be some supervillain. We will let things unfold as they do. Now, let's see. Here's another one. Carl says, I'm not expecting it from Leo XIV. Will there ever be a pope who will one day confirm the doctrine there's no salvation outside the church? I know many bishops and Catholics don't believe this. Well, the other problem you run into is after Vatican II, what it means to be in the church changed radically from what it was like 100 years ago. Like being a nice person with a valid baptism makes you in the church now.
No, way worse than that. I had to take my kids out of their local CCD class and catechize them from home because the diocesan approved religious ed textbooks said that people in the church are anyone of goodwill, including Muslims and our older brothers in the faith. And I was like, this is insane. That is not the church. So I went to my local priest and I was like, look, can I just catechize my kids from home? And I brought the issue up. He said, yeah, absolutely. Like it wasn't his parish that was releasing it. This was diocesan. Well, I wish I had saved those textbooks because people don't believe me when I say it. But yeah, they were saying essentially that anybody,
if you're Abrahamic, you're fine.
That's it. Like anybody,
which is like most of the planet.
Yeah, so that was what this textbook was trying to say. So, but look, also, like, did you see the Singaporean cardinal speaking with EWTN yesterday, saying that some of the things Francis had done were confusing? So Francis both brought people into the church, but then confused the church and caused division within the church. If it wasn't for us speaking out against all these things during Francis's pontificate, the bishops would have just been going about their business. But because they received that backlash from the faithful, that is why we even have a shot at getting some of these things corrected. So
yeah, I think I have that article saved for just talking about tomorrow or something, or making a video out of it.
Yeah, there's a video clip of it that I saw yesterday going and making the rounds. So
if you can send that to me later, that'd be very helpful. Now, speaking of, because we're going to wrap this up, because I know you've got a plan to catch, and I've got other things I have to do this morning. But I yesterday had planned to just launch into whatever the video title was for my live stream. But then the AI discussion really was taking off. And this is the people making fake videos out there of the Holy Father saying all sorts of awful things, and people making AI videos claiming all sorts of bizarre things. And it's to the point where I actually did contact my contact at in what they call a partner program in YouTube. And I sent them a link to the one of Leo XIV allegedly endorsing, like the group literally just trying to destroy the Catholic Church in Nigeria, right? Well, it turns out the Vatican has chimed in this. And I actually included this article to them as proof that this is all fake. The headline from Vatican News is fake message to President of Burkina Faso attributed to Pope. A 36-minute speech in English. There's your first flag. Pope Leo XIV is demonstrating that he is a man of fewer words, of greater substance. And I greatly appreciate that, actually. But created with artificial intelligence, has been uploaded to YouTube, falsely attributing to Pope Leo XIV words for Ibrahim Traore, president of Burkina Faso. Let's just go over this. This is incredible. If you haven't seen this video, it's got like a lot of views. It says, to His Excellency President Ibrahim Traore, President of the sovereign nation of Burkina Faso, son of African soil, defender of his people, may grace and peace multiply for you through wisdom, courage, and truth. Pretty sure that President Ibrahim Traore is a warlord, actually. Yeah. Judging from every picture I've seen in him, dressing much closer to Fidel than to Reagan, okay? And it goes over the technique used to pull this off. It says, viewers are led to believe that the new pope delivered an entire public address to Burkina Faso's president in response to his letter. And in the video, Pope Leo is made to say, I have read your words not once, but many times. And each reading has been deeper than the last, because in your voice I have heard not only the anger of a president, but the righteous cry of a continent, long wounded by the twin blades of abandonment and exploitation.
This is a scarier thing than we realized. So I had 2 times. My mother sent me one of those Pope Leo sermons on YouTube videos saying, can you believe the Pope said this? And it's so good. Then my wife came home yesterday and she goes, I just heard a sermon from the Pope.
Can you send me a link to that? Because I bet you that's a channel full of those, and I will send that to my partner program manager.
Yes, it's just Pope Leo sermons on YouTube. And the thing is, they're using AI. Look, we're talking about, this is 5th generational warfare. This is people using AI to make people think that somebody said something they didn't. And I think this is going to also play into them pushing digital ID on us, because you have to authenticate the message you're hearing. And this is going to be a way bigger issue than just some goofy sermon somebody is putting up on YouTube. I think this is really going to be, I mean, you see the Vatican's already having to make statements to clarify this was not the legitimate words of the Pope. So who knows where this goes, but I don't think it's just some silly thing happening on YouTube. I think anybody that can report that channel should report that channel, because sometimes they're very good things he's saying, but in those good things, you could slip subtleties in, and you got to be careful of that.
And it's literally bearing false witness.
Yes.
You're impersonating a priest.
100%.
You're impersonating the Pope. I mean, right. The only people allowed to impersonate a priest are actors, because the person watching it, if they are vaguely reasonable, has no reason to believe that a guy in a movie playing a priest is actually a priest. Right. That's the only people allowed to do that stuff. Yeah. Anthony Gonzalez says, Eva Cristo Rey. Yes, that's a good sentiment for us to begin to wrap this up with. So tell everybody where you're going.
Okay, so I'm actually, right after this, I'm going to be on Joe McLean's show, but Joe McLean is in Greece, where I am leaving to go at 4 p.m. this afternoon. So my in-laws are taking us away on vacation. We're going to Mykonos, but Joe is going to be in Mykonos tomorrow with Bishop Strickland on his pilgrimage. So I'm hoping to either bump into them on Mykonos or on Patmos the following day, but I'll be gone for a week. Anthony, thank you so much for having me on, man. We've always tried to figure this out, but I'm usually on my way into work in the morning, and because I had the day off, I was like, hey, come on, let's try and just do this one time. But I put
a link to your most recent video on your channel in the live chat, and I'll put one in the comments here right after we're done. It'll be the pinned comment for those who are interested. All right, folks, thanks very much for tuning in. All the things we went over will be in the show notes of my returntotradition.org, which I have a separate website for that because it has no ads on it, and YouTube has rules against posting links to places with advertising on it. They get kind of touchy about that, for all the reasons you would expect them to be touchy about that. But let me know in the comments what you think about all this. Maybe if you think we're being too nice about this or being too mean, that, my attitude is, let's see what the man does as Pope, and let's not lie to ourselves about it either. That doesn't mean you run around with their heads on fire or sit there and paint the rosiest of pictures either. Just be truthful wherever that takes you. But as always, folks, well, first, thanks to Anthony for making the time, and pray for the church, ladies and gentlemen. I am Anthony Stine with Anthony of Avoiding Babylon. Ave Maria.
Thanks, Ant.